So, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your busy day. Obviously, there's only a few people here, so we'll keep this very informal. You have a question, just ask. It'll be easy. I don't have to monitor the chat. I mean, with just a few people here, so um, I think that you might have had my bio already the before this meeting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the introduction other than I'm a faculty member at UTSA. I teach criminal justice courses. One of them is restorative justice. I'm also the restorative justice coordinator for UTSA. Um, and this is sort of my second career. My first career was in law enforcement. So I was a police officer for 20 years. And I did do some restorative work in law enforcement. So that's where I first got into this kind of work. And then now when I went to teach at UTSA, then I started doing more work in the school settings, and in particular K through 12. Um, so I did some work there. And then now I think my vision now, or my work now, is to try to get restorative justice practices into higher education. And so I'm working on, I'm also a doctoral student at UT Austin. And my research is going to be on exactly that. How can restorative justice practices sort of enhance what traditional student conduct models do? And so again, it's just one of my visions is to bring this more into higher ed. Again, very popular right now in K through 12, but not too many universities or colleges are doing it. But we're starting to see some now up north, Colorado, California, Florida, places like that are actually starting to use restorative practices. So again, just feel free to ask questions anytime. We can just chime in. So the objectives for tonight is, again, I'm going to define the term restorative justice, distinguish between restorative justice and traditional justice, and then list four restorative justice processes, and then explain some of the uses of restorative justice practices for addressing college student misconduct issues. So I think we all know that conflicts are going to occur, right? That's part of the human experience. Uh, they're going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right? But it's conflicts can, there's emotions involved, right? So strong emotions or anger exist, and so the normal response is what, to fight back. And again, we resort back to our that's we just, you get angry, and that's the way we do things. But I mean, again, the key here is how do we respond to conflict is what's going to make a difference. And obviously in college settings, students, staff, faculty, these issues are going to occur. um, at the moment, what we have in place in most higher ed institutions is ombudsman offices, or for students, obviously the student conduct offices, which again, they have their role, they have their place in what they do. But what if it's something that maybe does not meet the criteria for student conduct, or it doesn't really violate a university or college rule or policy. And sometimes students or staff members are left kind of like, well, how can I, what is that I can do to resolve this issue? And so this is more of a informal approach to be able to sort of address some of these conflicts. So here is a definition for restorative justice. Now there's, depending on author, there's at least three out there, but they all kind of say sort of the same thing. I just happen to pick this one. So restorative justice is a collaborative decision-making process that includes harmed parties, offenders, and others who are seeking to hold offenders accountable, right? It's a victim-centered approach to traditional justice, right? Whereas on traditional justice, it's a victim-centered approach. Here, it's more of the traditional justice is more of a offender-centered approach, and this one is more of a victim-centered approach. And so again, it's very inclusive. We will invite people to the conversation, and if anybody who wants to be there, and it's not just for victim and offender, but also any other party. Can be a neighbor, can be a family member, a friend, a parent. can be part of the process as well. So again, we invite people, if they want to be part of it, we're going to allow them to be in that conversation. So the principles of RJ, again, it's about relationships and the interconnectedness of people. And so we feel that when there's a conflict, there's a harm to someone, it's that broken relationship between those two people, and we try to get them connected, right? And so again, it's an inclusive decision making process. It's about active accountability. It's about repairing the harm, and again, the last bullet point there is about rebuilding trust, because sometimes that's not there. And so I think that most of us know when that trust is broken, it's going to be hard to repair the relationship, right? So we work at rebuilding that trust between those two individuals, or it can be a group of students, it could be student organizations or teams, and things like this. So that part of it is during the encounter, and I'll kind of speak about those encounters, the RJ encounters. We try to find the connection between people, and we're all sort of interconnected as human beings, right? And so the way we develop the questions allows for people to sort of kind of connect with one another, and then they realize, you know what, we sort of have some things in common, and that's where that trust building starts to happen. And so that's one thing that we see when we do these type of meetings between people or two groups of people. So there's two different views, right? So we have traditional justice, where we see crime as a violation of the law. Violations create guilt. Justice requires that the state determine guilt or impose punishment. Where on the restorative side, it's about crime as a violation of people and relationships. So again, very informal, right? Very informal approach. Violations create obligations, and not just for the responsible party, but for the community, right? Because it's how can we, as a community or as a campus, right? What can we do to help these individuals sort of kind of like, with a resolution or sort of work this thing out, right? It's not just between those two individuals, but, if it's again, I just use as a classroom as an example. If there's an incident between a couple of students in a classroom, or again, it's that whole classroom, right? So how can we all work together to sort of help this conflict or this relationship get better? Justice involves victims, offenders, and community members to make things right. So again, it's a very inclusive approach. As we go through the presentation, I'll give an example of a case that I worked in, how that plays out. So the questions again are three different questions. So again, traditional justice, right, is okay, what laws have been broken, who did it, and what do they deserve? On the restorative justice side, again, it's about who was harmed, what are their needs, and whose obligations are these. So a little different here, right? So we're focused on harms. What are their needs, and not just the needs of, I know I said this is a victim-centered approach, but also what are the needs of the offender or the responsible party? Because many times we find that people commit certain acts or they do certain things, and there's some underlying issues that are causing those problems, right? Or causing this person to do certain things. And so if it's for example, it might be a drug addiction issue, or it might be something else, right? So we also try to address those needs, and how can we help this individual so that way they don't reoffend and keep doing what they do. So we also we also address those things by referring them to other agencies or other organizations that might be able to help that individual. And again, those obligations, right? So again, many times I've seen again the community come together to help, or on a college campus, for example, it might be the administration or wherever this incident occurred, that will also step in to sort of help the situation. So the pillars of restorative justice, again, harms and needs. We for sure address those things. Again, and the needs on both sides, right? What are the needs for the victim? What are the needs for the offender? What are the needs for the campus, right? What is it that why is this happening here? I mean, and so again, trying to find out what the underlying issues are and address those needs. And again, the obligation is going to be important. It's not just, sometimes, it's like, well, we're going to leave between those two people, or we're just going to leave it to student conduct to address, or whoever. But it's bigger than that, because it involves the community, right? It's a village, so we all have to play our part. And the engagement, again, it's a very inclusive process. It's about inviting people to the conversation. Uh, Again, anybody who wants to be part of it is welcome to be. We're not going to force anyone that doesn't want to be part of it. It's a voluntary process. So at times there's people that they'll say, no, this is not for me, and I don't think I want to participate. And if they feel that way, that's fine. That's up to them. But those that want to be part of it, we will definitely engage them. And then it'll be, again, an active accountability as far as repairing the harms. It's not, many times people might think that restorative justice is a soft approach on dealing with certain issues, and it's not. There's a lot of things that, and I've got many examples of what they had to do to repair the harm. And some of these things are, I've heard some offenders say, this is not simple, because it's I hurt a lot of people, so now I have to, and then sometimes they want to do this, they want to make it right with them, and they will between the victim and the offender, they come up with a plan for reparation. And it's their plan, not our plan. It's their plan. So they come up with that plan. So the three basic objectives, again, is to identify the injustice, right? Telling their stories. So this is one of the parts that I really enjoy about this work, is that everybody has a story. All of us have a story, and when they hear that story, when you're in conversation with a group of people and they're hearing your story, right? This is how your actions affected my life, the life of my family, or the life of my, whoever was harmed by that incident, because of that ripple effect of crime, right? And they tell that story. It's a lot different than just, reading a police report or reading the narrative of an incident, right? They get to hear it from the individuals that they harmed. And that's what starts in all the, cases that I work, when I'm sitting there watching or listening to the conversation between the victim and the offender, and the victim's telling their story, and I'm looking at the offender, and you can tell they're just taking all that in, like, and I can see I start seeing some genuine remorse for what they did. And so that's what I think makes it real, right? It makes it real for them, because they're hearing it from a human being, and not, there's not somebody in front of them reading a report, or, this is real. I've got this person is right here sitting in front of me telling me how I harmed them. So that is one of the things that I really kind of like. Every time I hear those stories, I kind of like, it sort of makes it real for the offender. And to make things right, okay, exploring how the responsible party might begin to repair the harm. A lot of cases I work at, it's always something like, wow, I would have never thought of that. And it's the victim, we'll ask the victim, how can this person make it right? And some of the things they come up with are like, I would have never thought of something like that. And again, it's about them, right? So it's like, this is how, again, in my opinion, true accountability, right, to that person they harmed, is like, okay, I'm going to make this right for you, and this is what I'm going to do, right? And when I was doing it on the police department side, I never saw an offender not complete, or they always completed the plan. In other words, I never saw one not complete the plan, and that was pretty good. Although once I did, I only had one that, and that was really at the beginning stages of the process, that basically he said, I don't want to participate in this, and so it didn't ever happen. We never had the meeting. But the ones that I did have the meetings, they did the plan. They what they were supposed to do. So So to consider future intentions, right? Setting restitution, schedule addressing the underlying issues. Again, what are some of the underlying issues that the responsible party might be having? Is it again? Is it drugs? Is it family violence issues? Is it what's going on with this person that caused them to do all this? And then we find out a lot of things during these conversations, and then we try to get them the help that they need to hopefully they can um, not reoffend and stop doing what they're doing. So they need some help sometimes. So inclusion, again, as like I said before, it's a very inclusive process. So we, again, victims, offenders, community members, we don't exclude anybody. And again, it's if they want to be part of this process, we'll let them in. We don't send anybody away. Again, it's a voluntary process. We'll prepare them for the meeting. We don't just get people together to, okay, let's talk about this issue. No, we do preparation work first. Some preparation work might be not, depending on what the incident is. If it's something like a property crime, might not require a lot of prep work. But if it's something more of a physical assault or that kind of thing, or more of a high profile case. And so one of the cases that I worked, and I think this is the one I'm going to talk about here at the end, was a university in Texas. It wasn't UTSA, but it was another one. And it involved, it involved a lot of people, a lot of students, faculty, staff. It made national news. You get it. It was a big deal. And so we went and we worked that thing out. And at the end, it was a resolution that came out of it. It was a pretty awesome experience for me personally, working that case, because they did work it out at the end, which was pretty amazing to see. Okay, any questions at this point before I get into the type of encounters or programs?
I actually have a question, Professor Rico. Do you find that when you're explaining or your interactions with both the traditional view and the restorative justice view, do you feel there's any sort of like opposition in like, do you understand, or do people explain why they might be against that sort of viewpoint, if that makes any sense?
I think you said opposition, right?
Yes.
Okay. Like why would they be opposing the restorative process versus traditional?
Correct.
Yes. Again, we don't. So what's very important is not to try to force people to do restorative, right? So for example, when I was doing it with the police department, we had obviously the traditional route, right? They file a report. And it goes to the county attorney, district attorney, wherever, depending on the type of offense. So, and then we had restorative justice as a diversion program at that point. So when I was meeting with the victims, right, I would say, okay, we got a suspect in your case, and as a victim of a crime, you have certain rights, right? And so you're right, you have the right to file criminal charges, you have all these things. We also have this thing called restorative justice, and this is how this works. So I would basically explain both of them, and then I would ask them which one do you think do you want? And believe it or not, most victims did not want to file criminal charges, and so, but we were not. If I had a victim who said, no, I want to file criminal charges, I want this person to go to prison and rot there and all that, that's it. That I would not try to persuade them one way or the other. Right. So that's what this person wanted. And that's what we did. Right. So the only thing, some of the comments I've heard was restorative is a soft approach. Right. And from even some police officers, right. They at the time when I was working there, no, what is that? What are we going to do? We're going to just sit and talk. And so, but it's just, I think it's not, they don't quite understand what it is. And because when I first started doing this, when I first heard about it myself, I'm like, now what is this thing? What are we going to do? And I was like, I don't think I'm okay with this, right? I was a cop and my job is to put people in jail or, make arrests and file charges. And that's my job. But then when I first, I I got interested in it, started, kind of at that time, there was not a lot of RJ work doing, for sure in Texas. So I had to basically research it on my own. And it was a professor at UTSA who mentioned it in one of his classes. So there wasn't even no class in RJ at UTSA at that time. I started like, what is, it's just pretty interesting, right? So it took me to sort of research it myself. And then I actually attended a restorative conversation, that somebody was actually doing. And like, okay, there's something here about this process that I like, right? I saw how the victim was, sort of like, okay, yes, I can, this is what I want you to do to fix it, right? And so, but yeah, I think when I hear, sometimes people will like think it's a soft approach, and I want, most people want even when I was doing, because I did some of this work in a K through 12 setting in a middle school, right? And so I would have teachers tell me, no, I think punishment works better because they wanted that thump, right? So punishment has to hurt, and or discipline has to hurt is what I heard from a teacher one time. No, discipline has to hurt. I said, well, discipline doesn't mean punishment. Discipline means to train. But anyway, so that's sort of the they sort of kind of like, no, I'm not okay with this because it's too soft on it, and they're not going to be held accountable for it. No, they are going to be held accountable for it. So we're not just like, and I think that's I don't know, maybe it's just again, not knowing what it is and what it can do, so they feel, no, I just want, and that's okay. Again, if they want traditional justice, that's great. I'm not saying that we need to do away with traditional justice and all that. No, yes, we have that, but I guess my deal is, okay, we have this, and we also should have something else as an alternative, right? It's like, okay, if somebody doesn't want the criminal approach, then we need to have something else in place. You know what I mean? Or sometimes in like I was an investigator for some time. We would get people that would file a complaint. I was assaulted. This happened to me, but we couldn't prove the offense, right? We could not prove the offense occurred because there was lack of evidence, lack of whatever. Well, on the restorative side of things, we don't need all that evidence, right? We have somebody says, I was harmed and this is what happened to me. And then we would reach out to the responsible party and say, this individual came to us, said this happened. What do you have to say? And again, many times offenders would own up to it and say, yes, this is what happened. So at that point, we could get those two people together and in an informal process and get this thing worked out. So, there's so many ways you can set this up. But I think, again, to answer your question, I guess I gave you a long answer, but it's just some people just want traditional approaches, which is fine. That's what they want. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions before I get to the type of programs? Okay, so there's four that are mainly used in victim offender mediation. They call them VOMs. Conferencing model. That's what I did when I was with the police department. I used the conferencing model. Circles are very popular in school settings, and I've done many of those in K to 12 and now in higher ed. And then impact panels or boards. So those are the four encounters programs that are out there. So the first one, VOM, victim offender mediation, it's just like what it says. It's just you have the victim, you have the offender, and you have a mediator. That's it. Nobody else is part of the process. And those work well for when you're in like a maybe student on student thing or faculty student, two people really. So again, promotes dialogue between the victim and the offender. The harm party gets an opportunity to tell their story. The offender gets a chance as well. And then the training facilitator will guide the process but remains neutral, right? And so I guess sometimes I get the question, well, what's the between this and traditional mediation, right? Or conflict resolution? It's a little different because we don't, we start the conversation, right? We're here, but then most of the dialogue is between those two people. We kind of like just back off, and the conversation is between those two parties. We don't force them to come up with a resolution. So, it's not like, okay, we're not going to leave here until we come up with a resolution. No, we don't do that. It's going to be between those two parties. And if they don't come up with a resolution, then they don't. Uh, we might have to have a second meeting, or maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe they're not going to find a resolution. Uh, but, again, I did a lot of these as well, and worked out well. They came up with a resolution, and they worked it out. And so that's VOM. Conferencing, again, I use this a lot at the police department because this is sort of, and I dealt with a lot of juvenile offenders. And so they would bring in their parents, they would bring in a sibling, a neighbor, a friend, a teacher, things like that, as a support person for them on both sides, on the victim and the offender side. So they can bring somebody as a support person for them. Again, same process, right? So it allows the victim and the offender to invite support groups. All stakeholders affected by the incident get an opportunity to tell their stories and an attempt to collaboratively resolve the conflict. So a lot of these that I worked in, and I mean, good things came out of it. Resolutions. Again, I had assault cases, I had burglary cases, I had drug possession cases, and it's just listening to everybody's story that kind of like, I get it. I get now that what I did or my actions affected all these people in this room. And then they start kind of like, you can tell there's like genuine remorse. And then at the end again, it's how do we make it right? Right. What can this person do to repair the harm? So, again, the storytelling, I go back to that because it's like, this is something that, and I'll give you a quick example. So I had a case where it was a juvenile offender who broke into a car, burglary of a vehicle, stole a cell phone. And it was after school. And so, a bunch of people parked in front of the school, pick up their kids, that kind of thing. This mom left her cell phone in the car, left the windows down, walked out of the car to pick up her daughter. When this one kid's walking down the street, sees the car, looks in, sees a cell phone, grabs it, burglary of a vehicle, right? He's messing with the phone, walking down the street. In his mind, he realizes, you know what, this ain't right. Walks a couple of blocks down the school. There's an Exxon station, gives it to the clerk and says, hey, I found it. Here you go. Long story short, he files a report. We find out who the guy is, that he's on video. We get them together, right? Get the victim and the kid and his dad to get, I'm sorry, the kid and his mom in one of these conferences. Well, the reason that he took the phone was he single parent, comes from a single parent family. The mom works 2 jobs to make ends meet. They have, and I think it was 3 kids or something like that. And the kid says, as the offender's telling the story, he says, all my friends have cell phones and my mom can't afford it. So that's why I took it. And as I'm walking down the street, I knew that was wrong. I felt bad about it. And that's why I turned it into the Exxon. That's the story, right? And it's like, okay, we would have never known that, had this gone to a trial or a court. So then when we get to the part about, we asked the victim, how can this kid repair the harm done to you? What is it that you want him to do? And during the conversation, the kid said that his dad had passed away, I think 3 years prior. And so that's why they were struggling and, finances and all that. So we get to the point about how can he repair the harm, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, well, this lady can ask for the money to replace the phone because she had bought a new one. She can ask for those kind of things, right? Restitution. But what she wanted for the kid to write a letter to her. And in that letter, she wanted him to say, to write about what kind of man would your dad want you to be if he was here? And I was like, whoa. I was caught off guard with that one. And I was like, pretty like, okay, I got this kid to think, what kind of man what would your dad want you to be, right? If he was still around. And this kid wrote a pretty awesome letter about that. That's all she wanted. That's all she wanted to repair that harm. And she was satisfied with that. And so again, this is the storytelling part of this is where we find all these underlying issues, right? Not that it was right that he stole the phone, but that's why he did it, right? Was a good kid. He just, he wanted a phone. He wanted a cell phone. So all his friends had cell phones. And the victim was very satisfied with the result, the end result of this case, right? Like, okay, I understand why he took it. I don't want money. I don't want that. This is what I want. This is what will make it right with me. Not filing charges, but this is what will make it right with me. And so that's a good example of, again, what can happen when they collaboratively come up with a resolution.
And did this conferencing occur in lieu of court, or was it
Yes.
part? Okay.
Yes. So the way we had it set up was we had it as a diversion. So
Okay.
I would get the case. In other words, you know, we would get a case, and if it met certain criteria, right, the detectives would send it to me, or they would flag it and say, okay, this is a good case for RJ. I would look at the case, read it, and if it met what the criteria we had set up at that time, we said then I would take it. Then I would contact the victim. Like I said, I would contact the victim and said, okay, we have a suspect. You, as a victim of a crime, you have a right to file charges. No. This is how that works. We also have this thing called restorative justice, and this is how this works. No. And I remember her saying, no, I don't want to file criminal charges. I just want to speak to this person who took my phone. I want to talk to this person who took my phone. I want answers. So okay. And so we set up the conference. And yeah, this was not. And so then obviously when we come up with the plan, and if the responsible party completes the plan, then the case is basically, we just hold the case. It does not get pushed to the county attorney or district attorney, depending on the offense.
Have you ever encountered an issue where the victim chose conferencing but wasn't satisfied with the decision
No.
of the conferencing?
No.
Charges? No. Okay.
I have not. Now, can that happen? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that this is like, yeah, well, every case is going to work fine and everybody's going to no.
I mean, let's say in that incident, that example you gave, that the mother, she encounters the student or the juvenile, and he's cocky and arrogant and starts talking back, and it's just, and she realizes, well, this isn't going to work. Maybe he does need to go through the court system to receive some other kind of, alternative.
Right, and so that's why the preparation meeting is important.
Okay.
So we meet with both parties, and then we say, this is how this is gonna work, right? It's you explain the process, and if they're not ready to meet, we're not gonna have the meeting. And again, I had one case where the kid told me it was a disorderly conduct charge, and when I had the prep meeting when I had the meeting with him and his father, and I explained the process, and the kid looked at me and said, what I did, I don't think what I did was wrong, and I'll do that again. And at that point I said, okay, we're done. The meeting's over.
Yeah.
We're not going to move forward. Yeah. And his dad, no, I want him to do this. I said, sir, I was like, you heard what your son said, right?
Yeah. What you want and what your son wants are two totally different things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then after that, so they left, and the man was kind of upset. And then I think the next day, because it was a juvenile, so they had an attorney. The attorney calls me and I'm attorney so-and-so, I'm representing whatever. And I said, yes, how can I help you? I want my client to go through your program, or the restorative program. I said, well, he doesn't meet the criteria for it. Well, who's in charge of the program? I said, I am. And it's not going to happen. And so yeah, and that's for that reason, right? Because you don't want to create more harm for the victim.
And do you think that attorney could have gone to the judge and requested or mandated this?
No.
Okay.
Not the way we had it set up. No.
Okay, good. Okay.
So one of the things, and what I did prior to having this program started, I met with the district attorney, county attorney, city judge, JP courts, chief juvenile probation, everybody that's going to have juvenile cases, and I explained the process. And so they were all we were all in agreement that you run it, it's your thing, it's yours. And so I had that prior to you, because you got to make sure that's set up, right? Because you don't want. And so I had a case that actually got to the district attorney's office, because this kid actually got arrested. But the district attorney sent it back to me and said, hey, I think one of them got through the cracks. We got it, but we're going to hold it and we're going to send it back to you for you to work it out. And so that one worked out as well. It actually was it was a good case to work.
Yeah.
But those things have to be in place prior to you doing this kind of stuff, or else you're going to get, you know, those kind of problems that a judge will call, oh, no, we're going to do it. Like, no. It just depends on how it's set up. Now, there are some cities and states that do have it where the judge is the one, and now it's, you know, we want this to be a voluntary process as much as possible, right?
Mhm.
But there are some places that the judge is the one saying, hey, you're going to go to the RJ stuff.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a big fan of that model, but if that's all, for example, let's say Bexar County, if they would do that, I'll be happy with that, right? But the best way to have it, it's that it's totally voluntary, like all the way through.
Yeah.
Because now he's being forced to participate, and that's where some of these things might not work, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the preparation is going to be key. Questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay. And so circles, I do these a lot now, and now obviously COVID changed a lot because a lot of this stuff was face to face, and RJ work has been face to face. That's how it's been. And then obviously with COVID last year, March, we were like, boom, how are we going to do this now, right? So I've done a few circles virtually now. I'm not quite feeling the authenticity of it because you're not sitting in the same room with people, right? We're doing what we're doing now. A lot of distractions this way, but when you're in a circle or you're face to face with somebody, it's very different. You get a sense of what, you know, what's going on in the room, et cetera, right? But circles, again, they come from, you know, Aboriginal peacemaking practices, Native American practices, et cetera, cultures. It's a community-based decision-making process, and I love these things. I just did one a couple of weeks ago that involved a team, a whole team of you know, it was a team of 10 girls. There was an issue between two, but it was affecting the whole team. And the coach said, hey, you know, we need something. It doesn't quite meet student conduct, but there's these things going on between these two students. Can you help us out? I said, oh, absolutely. Yep. And so got them together, and we did sort of the circle format, but on Zoom, and it worked out. I mean, I was surprised that it did work as well as it did, because I mean, it's just different being on Zoom. It really is. That's just me. I you know, I have a hard time with this being authentic part on Zoom, but it worked out. I mean, I got good feedback from the coach and from the individual who set up the meeting. They said, no, we heard some good stuff from the girls. They really enjoyed the conversation. And so, and it's about how it's the guiding questions that we use for the conversation that really gets them to think and to kind of talk. And so circles are very popular in higher ed and then also in K-12 settings. So I'm really enjoying circles at this point. Yes, sir.
Do you do this voluntarily or do they pay?
So I mean, obviously for UTSA, I'm the RJ coordinator there. So I mean, I get paid to do that, right?
Okay.
So if it's you know, for example, if it's a school or university that does not have an RJ program, for example, this case study I'm going to talk about here in a minute, they paid. I guess it was a big deal. So there was 2 facilitators, you know, depending on the size of the scope of the issue. So there was 2 of us, but they paid us to do that. But they don't have it.
Who pays you?
The university did. That university paid us. They hired us as consultants. Yeah, we were
What
hired as
about-
consultants. Right.
What about the criminal cases that you talked about? The juvenile?
No, the criminal cases, I was doing those with the police department, so I was being paid by the city. So that was one of my roles, right? As I was the restorative coordinator for the police department. So that, yeah, I was being paid. I was on city time. Oops. Boards and impact panels, those can work great for example, in colleges, you have, you know, dorms or things like that, right? So where you create a panel of students, staff, and faculty. And so when you have these incidents that are like you don't have a primary victim per se, right? You have the community who's a victim, for example, minor possession, DUI, things like that, where the campus is the victim. So they can answer to this group, right? This board of students, faculty, or staff. How you create that? And so those can, like for example, now with my new role at UTSA as the director of RJ, I'm going to create panels and boards that like for the dorms, for the campus. We have 2 campuses, so be maybe one at the downtown campus and maybe one at the main campus. If we have an incident that's like that, then they answer to that board, right? So that's how these things work. Obviously, we the whole campus approach obviously is the best way of doing things. But so we start, there's 3 tiers. We start at tier 1, where that's about the building strengthening relationships. So restorative justice is not just to addressing conflicts or harms, but it's also to build community. And so, for example, at UTSA, I'm going to start with tier 1, right? My goal is to make, or my vision is to make UTSA a restorative campus, right? What does that mean? It means that UTSA is about, it's you're talking about the values, right? Respect, honesty, integrity, compassionate, caring, all that stuff. So my vision is tier 1 is to do that, to make sure that students feel welcome, they feel that they belong, having conversations like, so we're for example, you already had several circles that are sort of campus-wide circles when, like, the George Floyd incident happened. We're going to have one Friday, as a matter of fact, about a year after COVID, right? How are we dealing with that? Because students want to talk. I think earlier we were having a conversation, Sabrina, right? You said students are tired of Zooming and all that. So students want to talk. They want a place to be able to talk about how they feel, right? So we're going to have one on that a year after COVID. We had the post-election conversation. We had the insurrection conversation. So we have monthly conversations to build that relationship with our students and faculty and staff. So it's not just about addressing harms, but it's also about building and strengthening relationships. Tier 2 is about responding to conflicts. And again, I already covered that. And then tier 3 is reentry, right? Because unfortunately, we're going to suspend and expel students, right? That's just the way it is. But what do we do when they come back? How do we welcome them back to the campus, right? Because they're kicked out, but they're still road runners, or they're still, whatever the mascot is. We should not just, okay, they're out for a month, a semester, a year. There needs to be a process in place that we keep in contact with them. But what happens when they come back, right? That's going to be critical for them to be successful, because they feel like outcasts, right? What is it that we do that's going to support them? And so we do this in a restorative format. We welcome them back, welcome back. Here's, maybe faculty member, maybe counseling, maybe an administrator, a student, whatever, people to welcome this individual back. That's what's going to make them feel, okay, I belong here again, and not, so they can be successful.
And would this be part of the student's record if the student participates in this?
No.
No?
This is informal.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and so that's something that, I'm going to have to work out once I start my full-time role, right, is with student conduct. And so these people, they're going to refer in these cases to me. I'm assuming that for their purposes, there's going to be, I guess it would have to, right? So they get a case that goes to student conduct, and let's say the case gets referred to restorative justice. I'm sure that at some point they're going to have a record of, okay, this case was referred to restorative justice. So I guess the answer would be yes, then on their part, on student conduct part, right? So when we were doing it at the police department, and I go back to that, we would get a case, obviously, it's like a police report. We have a case number, just sign the case. The only thing that happened is on disposition part of it, it would say restorative justice, and that it went that route, and it was worked out. It was not, it didn't go any further than that. So obviously they were not getting they weren't being arrested, so there's no arrest record. but there is a police record, right? I guess if somebody would, when they do a background, they can find it. And I'm assuming that's the same thing with student conduct. I guess it has to be a record of some sort in their office of that incident.
So you'll only receive referrals from student conduct and
No,
not from, okay.
No, I'm getting referrals from EOS. I'm getting referrals from HR.
Okay.
If it's a faculty, if it's a staff, issue, it can be from anyone really, any department, athletics, housing.
Or a self-referral or
Yeah,
you or
as well. Yes, sure can. So again, open invitation, right? Safe spaces for dialogue, and that's the key here is creating safe spaces. Now with First Amendment issues that are going on right now, you're going to get a lot of that, right? It's going to happen. So how do we create safe spaces, right? So for students to talk, to voice their opinions about politics or whatever it is, telling their stories, compassionate listening and understanding. Again, compassionate listening is very different than active listening. This compassionate listening is listening from the heart. That's very different. And so we create these safe spaces, not only safe spaces, but brave spaces to have conversations. Next month, and I'll send you the link. We're going to have a conversation about, I'm invited a guest speaker to talk about restorative justice and anti-racism. And we were going to do that last semester, but when the executive order came out from the president at the time, the legal department says we can't have it. So we had to postpone it. Well, now it's back on. So we're going to do it I want to say it's April 8th. We're going to have that conversation about anti-racism. And Cheryl Wilson is going to be the guest speaker. And I'm going to do it kind of like a TED Talk format. But she will speak to, what's going on in higher ed and restorative justice practices and anti-racism work. And so, again, these are the type of conversations that again, that's why I say it's not only a safe space, but a brave space to have these conversations about. So the only way to address, racism is to talk about it. You can't just ignore it, right? So, so that conversation is happening next month. And I'll send you the link in case you're interested. So again, for this, we can use for campus climate issues, residential life, athletics, student organizations, faculty and staff. I think I've mentioned that. I want to go for the sake of time here. Here's a case study real quick it's a major university. I won't tell you which one it was, but, and you might know, because you might have heard it. It was on the news and it made national news, but a fraternity president made some pretty horrible comments. He was chatting with his brothers in a chat group. Basically, he was talking about shooting illegal people crossing the border and making it legal, taxing it. And so in his words, they were like, it's a win-win for everybody. So that chat was made public by one of his brothers. And I'm sure you can imagine what happened after that. The president of the university wanted this kid expelled. Can't do that, right? He's protected under the First Amendment. So they tried everything. Everybody was, they were calling the president's office from all over the place, the community, the student organizations, faculty, staff. I mean, you get the picture. And finally they said, well, they reached out to a colleague of mine that said, well, we heard about restorative justice. What can they do for this case? I said, well, we can try to get people together and with this person who made these comments to see if we can, long story short, they hired us and we went out there. And again, preparation was a key with this one, because there was a lot of people who were harmed and wanted to hurt this person, right? And so we made sure we met with a lot of students, and it was a lot of preparation work. But at the end, we managed to get the responsible party, the person who made those comments, with all these different student organizations and whatnot. And there was a discussion about the incident, and they came up with a resolution for this thing. And I was really, I was like, wow, what they were saying in those conversations, it was like, this person who made the comments was really taking all that in. I can tell this guy was remorseful big time. And then he wanted to make it right. He goes, I want to make this right. What can I do? And they came up with this. We were writing all these ideas on the board, and we were there till I forgot what time of the night it was. And we had all these ideas. And I said, okay, we got to narrow it down, right? We can't do 250 things. And so they narrowed it down to, I think, 15 or something. And then that was the plan. And then it was up to the dean of students of that university to make sure that the plan was done, right? And so, but that last conversation with all those students was like, it was very, hopeful that, or at least I had a lot of hope that this was going to it was going to work out. And there was I didn't sense any anger anymore towards this person at the end. And so it was just it was a good experience for me.
Is it something that he had to do, or
Yes.
or his fraternity also?
He was the only one of the frat that volunteered.
Okay.
But which was because and he was the one that made the comments. So that was I was happy that the one who made the comments wanted to be part of it. The other ones did not. So again, it was a good experience for me on that one. Again, just some of the things that some of the students said, again, talking about the stories, right? There was a Latina student who said that she had a nightmare that night that her entire family was murdered. Students of color said they were on guard for incidents of bias and racism. Students believe the university has underlying issues with racism and inclusivity. So we told them all that. We gave the university the report. There was this third bullet point right here. That was a big thing also that came out of this. And we gave all this to the administration. Look, this is what they're saying. And again, I don't know what they did with it, but again, we just gave them the information. Again, the harm parties. It hurt a lot of people. It did the community. We did not include community members, which was, I think, a sad part for me because obviously I say it's an inclusive process, but we just did not have the time to include community members, right? It just we would have needed more time. And the university only gave us a limited number of days to work it, so we couldn't include them. So again, we were there. It was crazy that we did this in 2 days. I was very nervous about that. I said that is not enough time to work something like this magnitude. How it worked out at the end, I was like, I don't know, but it worked out. It was a pretty awesome experience, like I said. So we've got all these people together. It was 2 long days. We were working there from 8 to, I forgot what time in the middle of the night. So, but it ended up being a good thing at the end. Again, they came up with a reparation plan. It was theirs, not mine, not ours. Some of the broader community needs were agreed upon, and healing and understanding. That was the biggest part right here, was the healing and understanding. That was pretty awesome to see. Here's a comment from one of the students. Restorative justice can heal the soul much better than jail time. My first time in the circle was very fulfilling, where there was anger before, now there's understanding. And that was a quote from one of the students that we got. And I'll finish with this quote. Dialogue cannot exist, however, in the absence of the profound love for the world and for people. Any questions?